What if the Maya civilization wasn't a surprise? What if they didn't emerge, but were expected centuries before the Maya built their cities, before their calendars tracked time with terrifying accuracy, before their gods were carved into stone? Another civilization was already here, older, more advanced than they should have been. And then, without collapsing, without being conquered, they vanished, but before they disappeared, they left something behind. Not ruins, not weapons, not even writing. They left warnings, stone faces staring into the future, symbols that didn't belong to their time, and knowledge that only made sense after the Maya arrived. Tonight, we're not asking who the Olmecs were. We're asking something far more disturbing. Did the Olmecs predict the coming of the Maya and quietly step aside? Long before the Maya, before the Aztecs, before history in Mesoamerica even had a name. There were the olmecs. They appeared around 1500 BCE, settling along the humid Gulf Coast of what is now modern-day Mexico. This wasn't an easy place to build a civilization. Dense jungle, swamps, rivers that flooded unpredictably. Yet somehow, in this unforgiving landscape, the Olmecs didn't just survive, they organized. And at a time when much of the world was still experimenting with basic tools and small settlements, the Olmecs were already doing something deeply unusual. They were building ceremonial centers. Not villages, not temporary camps, massive, carefully planned ritual sites arranged with intention, symmetry, and alignment. Many of these centers line up with celestial events, tracking the movement of the sun, the stars, and possibly even Venus. This wasn't coincidence. It suggests observation over generations and knowledge passed down with precision. Then there are the stone heads. Colossal sculptures carved from basalt, some weighing more than 40 tons, each one unique, each one transported across miles of jungle terrain without wheels, without metal tools, without horses or oxen, just human effort, planning, coordination. That alone should make the Olmecs impossible for their time. But here's where the story begins to fracture, right? Because the Olmecs weren't just builders, they were system creators. They laid the foundations for ideas that would later define Mesoamerican civilization itself. The earliest known concepts of the long count calendar appear in Olmec culture, a way of tracking time not in days or seasons, but across vast cosmic cycles. Time to the Olmecs wasn't linear. It was layered, repeating, alive. They developed the ritual ball game, a symbolic contest that wasn't just sport, but cosmology in motion, life, death, sacrifice, and rebirth played out in stone courts. Centuries later, the Maya would treat this game as sacred, but the Olmecs were there first. Their art is filled with cosmological symbols, jaguars representing power and transformation, serpents tied to the sky and underworld, and cross-like motifs symbolizing the four corners of the universe. These symbols would later become central pillars of Mayan belief. And then there's the most controversial piece, possible early writing. Not fully developed scripts, but symbols that repeat, cluster, and behave like language. Ideas frozen in stone, messages that feel intentional yet incomplete. All of this, calendars, rituals, symbols, proto-writing, are things the Maya would later master. But the Olmecs didn't. They created these systems and then never fully used them. It's almost as if they were experimenting, testing ideas, laying groundwork, building a framework meant for someone else to finish. Because this is where most documentaries get it wrong. They tell you the Olmecs were simply primitive ancestors, a rough draft of civilization that slowly evolved into something better, but evolution doesn't work like that. You don't see a society invent complex systems, refine them, and then abandon them. You don't see a civilization reach forward in time unless it was never meant to stay there, unless those systems weren't designed for them at all. The Olmec colossal heads are one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in archaeology. 17 massive stone faces scattered across ancient Olmec territory, each one carved from solid basalt, each one weighing anywhere from 20 to over 40 tons, and yet no two are the same. Different facial features, different expressions, different helmets. These weren't mass-produced monuments. They were individualized, intentional. Every head stares forward, not upward toward the gods, not downward toward the earth. Straight ahead. That detail alone is strange. Most ancient sculptures were designed to be viewed from below or above, to project power, divinity, or submission. The Olmec heads do neither. They meet the viewer at eye level, as if meant to confront someone, or wait for them. For decades, archaeologists assumed the heads represented Olmec rulers, powerful leaders immortalized in stone. Others suggested they depicted elite warriors, the helmets interpreted as protective gear used in the ritual ball game or in combat. Both explanations sound reasonable until you notice what happened next. The heads were buried, not smashed, not vandalized, not pushed over by invaders. They were deliberately placed into pits and covered with earth. Carefully. That changes everything. Destroying a monument is easy. It's what conquering armies do. But burial requires planning, labor, and time. Someone had to decide where each head would rest. Someone had to organize the effort, and someone had to believe it was worth preserving these enormous sculptures, even while hiding them. Why would a civilization go through that effort? Why bury monuments that likely took years, possibly decades, to create? One explanation is ritual closure, the idea that burying sacred objects retires them. But that doesn't fully explain the scale or consistency of the act. These weren't small ceremonial items, these were the largest sculptures in the entire civilization. Another explanation is protection. Buried stone survives erosion, weather, and vandalism far better than exposed monuments. Which raises an unsettling thought. What if the Olmecs weren't trying to erase their past, but preserve it? And not for themselves. The heads weren't hidden randomly. Many were buried near ceremonial centers or along pathways that later cultures would still use. Some were even repositioned before burial, as if orientation mattered, almost like they were being placed on a map. Markers, not tombstones, not idols, markers left behind intentionally, because markers serve one purpose: they wait. Wait for someone who knows where to look, someone who understands their meaning, someone who comes later. And suddenly, the forward-facing gaze makes sense. The heads aren't looking at the Olmec world, they're looking past it, into a future the Olmecs would never see, but somehow seem to expect. Which forces us to ask a dangerous question: what kind of civilization buries its greatest achievements? Not because it failed, but because it knew someone else was coming next. Across Olmec sites, archaeologists have uncovered symbols that feel wrong for their time. Not crude, not accidental, out of place, carved into stone, etched onto jade, and molded into clay, are images that seem to belong to a later world. Jaguar-human hybrids, figures frozen mid-transformation, serpents twisting through space, linking earth and sky, and cross-like shapes representing the four cardinal directions of the cosmos. These aren't decorative choices, they're a cosmic language, and if they sound familiar, it's because they should. Centuries later, those same symbols reappear at the very center of Mayan belief, but now fully awakened. The jaguar is no longer just an animal of power, it becomes the lord of the night, a guardian of the underworld, and a symbol of kings who move between worlds. The serpent evolves into Kukulkan, the feathered being that links earth to sky, time to eternity, and the simple four-direction cross expands into a complete cosmic blueprint shaping how Mayan cities are laid out, how their calendars measure time, and how rituals mirror the structure of the universe itself. But when these symbols appear in Olmec art, something feels incomplete. The jaguar figures lack clear narrative context. The serpents appear without fully developed myth. The cosmic crosses exist without the layered meanings the Maya would later assign to them. It's as if the olmecs understood the shape of the ideas, but not their final form, or worse, as if they understood the final form, but chose not to reveal it yet. Look closely at olmec carvings and you'll notice something unusual: repetition without explanation. Symbols recur across sites separated by distance and time, yet no long texts accompany them. No stories carved into stone, no clear instructions, just fragments, hints, pieces of a larger system that never fully materialized. Then the Maya appear, and suddenly those fragments snap into place. The jaguar is no longer just a powerful animal, it becomes a metaphysical being tied to kingship and the night sun. The serpent isn't just a creature, it's a god, a calendar, and a political symbol. The cosmic cross expands into a complete model of the universe, governing how temples are built, how time is measured, and how life itself is understood. The Maya didn't simply copy Olmec imagery, they activated it, which raises a deeply uncomfortable question. If the Olmecs were simply an early culture fumbling toward meaning, why did they choose symbols that later proved to be perfect foundations for one of the most complex belief systems in the ancient world? Why these symbols? Why not others? Civilizations usually experiment wildly. Many ideas fail. Most symbols disappear. But the Olmec's symbolic choices didn't fade. They matured. That suggests forethought, selection, intention. It's almost as if the Olmecs were sketching the outline of a story they knew they wouldn't finish, leaving behind a symbolic framework that only a future civilization with the right worldview, the right timing, and the right intellectual tools could complete. And that's the part historians rarely linger on, because once you accept that possibility, you're no longer talking about cultural influence. You're talking about anticipation. About a civilization that wasn't just expressing its beliefs, but planting ideas it expected someone else to understand later, which leaves one unsettling question hanging in the air. How did the Olmecs know which symbols would still matter centuries into a future they would never live to see? Let me flip this on you. What if the Maya weren't inspired by the Olmecs? What if they were fulfilling a design the Olmecs already started? The Olmecs didn't see time as a straight line, they saw it as a cycle. Worlds rising, worlds ending, worlds repeating. This belief would later define Mayan cosmology, but the Olmecs went further. Their art suggests multiple ages of humanity, gods who return across eras. Knowledge that must be passed forward, not preserved. That last part is critical. The Olmecs didn't build libraries, They didn't inscribe long texts. They encoded ideas into art, architecture, alignment, as if they believed the wrong people reading it too early would be dangerous. Around 400 BCE, the olmecs fade away. No mass graves, no evidence of conquest, no environmental disaster big enough to explain it, that they simply, stop. And within a few centuries, the Maya rise, not slowly, not clumsily, but with advanced mathematics, precise astronomy, complex theology, monumental cities, almost like they stepped into a role that was already prepared. Civilizations don't usually vanish peacefully, unless leaving was the point. Some researchers believe the olmecs tracked celestial cycles far beyond what we credit them for. Planetary alignments, long-term astronomical patterns. If you understand cycles well enough, you don't just predict seasons, you predict eras. What if the olmecs believed their time was temporary, that their purpose wasn't to rule, but to prepare? There's a controversial idea whispered in academic circles, not published, not taught, the idea that the olmecs intentionally decentralized their knowledge. They spread fragments across regions, across cultures, across time, so no single group could misuse it. Then when the right civilization emerged, those fragments would reconnect. The Maya weren't chosen by bloodline, they were chosen by understanding. If this sounds unbelievable, ask yourself why the Maya revered olmec sites. They never built, why they treated them as sacred ground. You don't worship ruins unless you know who built them. These symbols weren't random artistic choices. They were too consistent, too deliberate. The olmecs returned to the same imagery again and again across different sites and generations, as if they were preserving something specific, not stories, structures of belief. The Maya didn't stumble upon these ideas by chance. They recognized them, expanded them, completed them, which suggests the olmecs weren't guessing which symbols might endure. They selected the ones that would survive time itself. And that's the disturbing implication. The olmecs weren't just creating meaning for their present, they were designing it for a future they somehow anticipated. Here's the thought that keeps historians awake. What if the olmecs didn't just predict the Maya? What if they believed another civilization would come after them too? And what if that civilization is us? Stop thinking of ancient civilizations as failures. Some of them may have succeeded by knowing exactly when to walk away. The olmecs didn't disappear into the jungle, they disappeared into time, leaving behind clues, markers, unfinished ideas, not for the Maya alone. But these clues weren't left for everyone. They were left for anyone curious enough to notice the pattern, the repetition, the timing, the unfinished ideas scattered across centuries. The real question isn't whether the olmecs predicted the rise of the Maya. That part now feels almost unavoidable. The deeper, more uncomfortable question is this: were they preparing for more than one successor? If knowledge can be handed off once, it can be handed off again. And if that's true, then the olmecs may not be relics of the past at all. They may be watchers still waiting for the next civilization ready to understand what they began. And whether we'll recognize it before it's too late